This is a video to help you practice your English skills. You are going to practice your listening and your writing skills. I am going to read 5 sentences about the topic of giving at a high intermediate level. You will write down each sentence exactly as you hear them, and then after you write them down, I will show you what they look like when they are correctly written and explain grammar and spelling tips and tricks to help you understand each sentence a little bit better. At the end of the video, I will give you a vocabulary list of important words related to this topic. Let's get started. So join me for daily dictation. There are new sentences and new topics frequently available. And there's 2 English levels offered if this is a little bit too difficult. The instructions for this activity. You'll need a blank piece of paper and a pencil. 5 sentences will be read, and each sentence will be read 3 times and 1 more time at the end. You have to write down each sentence exactly as you hear it, and you will use your listening skills to do this. Try your best to apply the correct spelling, punctuation, and capitalization in each sentence. So you're going to see on the screen here numbers 1 to 5. Each number represents a different sentence I will read, starting with number 1. Her generosity inspired a large contribution to the shelter. Her generosity inspired a large contribution to the shelter. Her generosity inspired a large contribution to the shelter. Number 2. They started a fundraising campaign because the nonprofit needed more resources. They started a fundraising campaign because the nonprofit needed more resources. They started a fundraising campaign because the nonprofit needed more resources. Number 3. His compassion led him to volunteer at the community center every weekend. His compassion led him to volunteer at the community center every weekend. His compassion led him to volunteer at the community center every weekend. Number 4. The organization's advocacy efforts grew after a major pledge was made. The organization's advocacy efforts grew after a major pledge was made. The organization's advocacy efforts grew after a major pledge was made. Number 5. Their outreach program helped many families as the humanitarian group provided food and supplies. Their outreach program helped many families as the humanitarian group provided food and supplies. Their outreach program helped many families as the humanitarian group provided food and supplies. Now I will read each sentence starting with number 1. Her generosity inspired a large contribution to the shelter. Number 2. They started a fundraising campaign because the nonprofit needed more resources. Number 3. His compassion led him to volunteer at the community center every weekend. Number 4. The organization's advocacy efforts grew after a major pledge was made. Number 5. Their outreach program helped many families as the humanitarian group provided food and supplies. All right, so we're going to get ready to check our answers. If you found that this was just a little bit too fast, you can listen again and adjust the playback speed to make it go slower. If you just need to listen to specific sentences again, check the description for timestamps, and this will help you listen to specific sentence numbers. Now we're going to get ready to check our answers. So, here is the first sentence that we had today. Her generosity inspired a large contribution to the shelter. In this case, her generosity is the subject of the sentence. And here, generosity is the noun when we do have a possessive adjective right here, which is her. This together is the subject, and the verb is inspired. And what did it inspire? A large, so adjective. And then contribution is a noun. We know this because it ends in T-I-O-N. And then it shows where. So this preposition too shows where the contribution is going to this noun, the shelter. For spelling, generosity is a difficult word because this G sounds like a J a little bit, generosity. And so just to help you spell it, you can split it up. Gen, os, it. Gen, os, it. And this is kind of going with the syllables to help split it up in a way that makes sense. Contribution. So you can also split this one up and you can do contribution, just like that. When you split it up into these smaller bits, you're able to memorize the letter order a little bit more easily. Number 2, they started a fundraising campaign because the nonprofit needed more resources. So here we have 2 clauses. They started a fundraising campaign, and then because the nonprofit needed more resources. This one is an independent clause, and this one is a dependent clause. Because we have the 2 clauses in this order, that means that we do not need a comma. Otherwise, they is the subject, started is the verb, and a fundraising campaign is the object of the first clause. Because is a subordinating conjunction, the nonprofit is the noun, needed is the verb, more resources is the object. And so in both sentences, we do have that. For this spelling, fundraising could be hard. So fund, raising would be the easiest way to split it up to remember you spelling it. Nonprofit, it actually sounds exactly as it is spelled. So just remember that there's no E in there because some people get that mixed up, non and none. And lastly, campaign. So I would just split it up as camp. And then ain is hard because it's not spelled as it sounds. This G is silent. So just remember that there is a G there. So that's why it's good to split it up so you can really focus on this part. Number 3. His compassion led him to volunteer at the community center every weekend. So for this one, we have his compassion in the same way as her generosity. That's going to act like the subject. And so this subject split up is just a possessive adjective and a noun. We know it's a noun because it ends in S-I-O-N. Led is the verb. Him is the object. And since we have this verb, then the next verb, volunteer, we have has to be in the infinitive form. Like that. And then because we're talking about a place after that, we're going to use preposition at to talk about this place, community center. Something about spelling. This might be tricky because here we have RE. I'm located in Canada, so here we spell it R-E, and I believe that the UK, maybe even Australia, spells it like this as well, but America will spell it like E-R. So if you wrote E-R, that's correct also. Then every weekend is just an adverb of frequency after that. When you spell this sentence, remember that there is double consonant compassion and then two E's in volunteer to make the long E sound. There's only one E, it would say volunteer, which is actually not a word in English. So you want two E's to have that long E sound. 4. The organization's advocacy efforts grew after a major pledge was made. All right, so for this one, we do have a possessive here. We have this apostrophe to show who do the advocacy efforts belong to. They belong to the organization. Grew is the verb, and then we do have the word after to show a time relationship to the next part, a major pledge was made. The most difficult words here would be advocacy and pledge. So advocacy, it's good to split this up like this, advocacy. One of the more tricky things about this is both of the C's make different sounds. And that depends on the vowels that they follow. So because this is followed by A, it is going to make a K sound. But like E and I, when a C is followed with Y, it makes an S sound, advocacy, like that. So to focus on this and just really think about the vowels that are following after the C's is going to help you with your spelling. Efforts here is an E and a double consonant F. Pledge is really difficult because you actually don't hear the D very clearly. So pledge, I would just try to remember that pledge has the word edge in it. Edge. When you remember that, then it becomes a little bit more clear because usually people are able to spell edge, even though for that one you can't hear the D very much either. But if you just spell E-G-E in the word edge, it looks very wrong. So if you remember that edge is in the word pledge, you will be able to spell it more easily. And number 5. Their outreach program helped many families as a humanitarian group provided food and supplies. So this one we do have two clauses. Their outreach program helped many families is first, and there is an independent clause. And then we have, as the humanitarian group provided food and supplies. So over this part here, this is the dependent clause, and it has this subordinating conjunction as right in the middle. And so because we have this in the middle, a comma is not necessary. However, because this is such a long sentence, you can optionally add the comma. And if you optionally add the comma, that would actually be okay because that provides clarity because these two ideas are so long, but you don't have to. So if you did add a comma there, you're correct. But if you didn't, you're correct also. And this kind of choice to add commas and not add commas is what makes comma usage and the rule of using commas in English so difficult. To look at some other things here, their outreach program helped many families. So their outreach program is the subject, helped is the verb, and many families is the object. And as the humanitarian group, that is the subject in this clause, provided is the verb, and food and supplies is the object of that. So both of these parts can be split up with this subordinating conjunction as in the middle. Overall, a lot of the words in number 5 should be relatively easy to spell. Outreach, that one might have been hard just because you might not be familiar with it, but it's just the word out and reach put together, and it is one word. So that's what you're going to want to remember for next time is that it is one word. And humanitarian could be tricky as well, but you could put human, it, Aryan, and that would help you break it up to spell it. Human, It-arian will help. And so that is a bit of a breakdown of the spelling tips and tricks and a little bit of the grammar that you see in these sentences. I'm going to give you a clearer list of the vocabulary related to this topic that you should be familiar with. Okay, so vocabulary to review is pledge, advocacy, nonprofit, volunteer, contribution, generosity, humanitarian, fundraising, compassion, and outreach. So these are good words to know. They are relatively advanced, not as simple, which shows that if you use these words in conversation, that you have a pretty good handle on English as long as you use them correctly. So make sure that you're using them properly in sentences with the proper grammar. If you're writing, make sure that you're spelling them correctly. And if you are reading, make sure that you're pronouncing them correctly. Besides that, we are all finished for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.